It's you remember where you were. And unfortunately for a lot of people, those moments are not great ones. We remember the tragedies, except that 1980 Olympic team. Full disclosure, I was not alive for that, but it's transcended generations where people remember where they were the moment they saw you guys beat the Soviet Union.
I hear the story all the time, depending on how old they were. Some people will say, I remember D-Day, the Challenger, 9/11, Parkland shooting, Kennedy, assassination. Mm-hmm. Every time somebody brings it up to me, it's a tragic story. And then they'll say, I remember where I was when we won. And I go, I didn't know you were on the team.
Yeah.
But everybody's
they feel part of it.
It's the same way. Let me tell you where I was. Let me tell you a funny story. And you sit there and you listen to them, and they're all good stories. You see, you bring a smile to someone's face. I mean, I've had people come up to me and literally start crying because the moment meant that much to them for whatever reason. It might be because it was such a great victory, or because it was the last time they watched a game with their dad or their mom, or as a family. I mean, there's always a story behind the story, so to speak. And it's great. I mean, it's, to bring joy to so many people without even knowing it is pretty special.
You mentioned not even knowing it. Did he get a sense, Mike, at the time at all, going through it, how big of a moment this was?
Other than people in Lake Placid being excited and my family calling home. I remember I called home after we beat the Soviets, and my sister started screaming on the other end of the phone, and I said, well, obviously you're having a party. I'll call back, and I hung up. So that's all we knew about it, other than family, friends, and people in Lake Placid. And it wasn't until after the Olympic Games that we got out into the countryside and went, wow, this thing was huge. And even 40 years later, I still get tons of letters in the mail, tons of people asking me questions. I'm still busy doing corporate speaking and things like that, but we never thought it would have the legs that it had. And it's nice to know because it's a good story. It's a great story. It's uplifting. It's fun, and it meant a lot to a lot of people for a lot of variety of reasons.
Mike Eruzione with us in studio has got a new book, the making of the man behind the gold medal winning, the go-ahead goal, of course. You're the one who made it 4-3. Now, Moose has already outed me to the entire tri-state area. Mike, I'm the only person in this world who has not seen Miracle. I'm so sorry. I apologize. But separate. I've seen some
it's on
scenes.
The to-do list.
I've seen been a little busy, had a child 6 months ago, all that stuff. But no excuses. Separate some fact and fiction from the movie, because the scene I have watched is the famous scene where Herb Brooks is making you guys, after you see like these cute Norwegian girls in the stands, then he makes you do all these sprints, and that scene is fantastic. Did it really happen?
Yes, but not the way the movie had it portrayed.
Okay.
We weren't, first of all, looking at the stands at the girls. I mean, that was kind of funny. Matter of fact, when I watched Miracle for the first time, my wife was with me watching it, and she goes, did that really happen? I went, honey, trust me, that didn't happen. At least I didn't look at the girls, I said.
Good story, Mike. Good story. Stick with that.
We skated that night. We played the game that night. That night, we didn't dress everybody. I think only 16 guys dressed, which was sometimes normal for us. Herb would just dress 3 lines. And the other guys were in the stands watching the game. And the game ended in a 4-4 tie, and Herb wasn't happy with the way we played. And we got through shaking the Norwegian players' hands, and we started to skate off the ice. And next thing you know, we're at one end of the ice, and we started to do drills called Herbies. We named them after Herb. We loved it so much. And it was a suicide, a gasser. Athletes have done those things. And we did it in segments of 5 at a time, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen. And we did it in waves of 3. So you'd go down, back, that whole thing. And we did it for about 15 minutes. And then he blew the whistle, and we stretched. And we skated in a circle and stretched. Then he blew it, and we went back to line, and we did him again. And then we did him again, and then we did him again, and we did him probably for about an hour and 15 minutes after the game. They did shut the lights off in the building because we had to play Norway the next day, and the guy who ran the rink says, look, here's the key, just go out that back door because you're coming back tomorrow, and the rink will be open for the game tomorrow. And the guys who didn't dress, they went to get their equipment on, and the assistant coach said, no, stay and just watch. So we did the Herbies, and how the drill actually ended was Mark Johnson smashed his stick against the glass. After a while, guys had been smashing their stick against the glass because we were obviously a little pissed off here. Why is he doing this?
Yeah, for sure.
And after Mark smashed it against the glass, Herb said, if I hear another stick break against the glass, you'll skate till you die. Well, nobody said a word, and then he finally blew the whistle. We went in the locker room, and he said, if you guys play this way again tomorrow, you're going to skate again. We won 8-0 the next day. So point
it worked.
Was well taken. But the Herbies, as we called them, We did them actually throughout the whole year. That was part of our conditioning at the end of practice, but never to the extent that we did them in the movie.
Okay, so I didn't see the movie, but I did read your book, and I thought it was really interesting that you said, you went out to Los Angeles to be a consultant on the movie, and that the actors couldn't skate.
That was the first movie. That
Okay.
was the first with Carl Malden. Carl
Yeah,
Malden
okay.
played, and the actors couldn't skate. This movie, the Miracle movie with Kurt Russell, they hired hockey players to teach to act rather than actors to teach to play hockey. So
Smart.
the hockey scenes in Miracle were dead on because these guys have all played, some former NHL players, minor leaguers, college players. So the skating in the movie was legitimate.
Mike, how about being the captain of a team? And you talk about it, but from that group being Minnesota, Boston, that group being a guy to bring that group together. Certainly, Herb played a role. I'll ask you about that. But what about your role being the leader of that team, bringing that group together?
It was not a big deal. When you look at that team, first it was a great honor to be the captain, but it wasn't a big deal to me. And I say that because we had a team of captains. Jack O'Callahan was a two-time captain at Boston University. Billy Baker was captain at Minnesota. Mark Johnson, Bobby Suter were captains at Wisconsin. Kenny Morrow, Mark Wells were captains at Bowling Green. John Harrington and Mark Pavlich were captains at Minnesota Duluth. Davey Christian, Neil Broughton, Mike Graham's captains of their high school teams. Buzzy Schneider, captain of his high school team. The 20 players in that room, all 20 guys were captains.
We're captains at some point in time.
So to me, being the captain was nice, but the important thing for me was just to be myself, not try to be different. Oh, here I am, I'm the captain. And I think my players, my teammates respected me on the ice as well as off the ice, and that was more important to me than being captain. And I'm still convinced I wasn't elected captain by my teammates. Too many Minnesota kids in the team, they're not going to vote for a guy from Boston. And maybe Herb felt that. Maybe Herb felt he needed somebody not from, although Billy Baker was the assistant captain on the team. But the whole team was, how can you try to be a captain for Mark Johnson, the best player in the team? You just be a good teammate, and that was my approach.
What about her?
yeah.
I'm sorry, man. What about Herb in terms of, because he was certainly, a master motivator, a guy that loved to, Bill Parcells used to always talk about the fact that, a good head coach, regardless of sport, you're a part-time therapist. What about the role of Herb and why he was the perfect spot and the perfect guy for that team?
Well, one of the great things about Herb was he was a great motivator. And what he could do is he could motivate you individually, but yet the team collectively, which is a great talent to have. He knew what buttons to push. You yell at Mike Eruzione, I'll get mad and I'll get pissed and I'll work harder. Don't yell at Mark Johnson. He'll figure it out. You don't need to yell at Kenny Morrow. Jack O'Callahan, absolutely. You can get in Jack's face. Phil Ricotta, you can get in his face. So he knew what players that he could use to motivate the team. So individually he could do it, and yet he did it collectively. And I think that's a great coach.
We're talking with Mike Eruzione, the captain of the 1980 Miracle on Ice team. The Making of a Miracle is the book. And this was one of the passages, if you don't mind, if I just read it for a second, because I thought this was hilarious. You're talking about the minor leagues, and I grew up in a minor league town. And I was an intern, actually, for an IHL team, if you'll believe that, when I was in high school. And I have memories of that of my own. But this was hilarious. So you're in Dayton, Ohio. And you said, I hadn't been on the team for long. We got a new player, Bill Goldie Goldthorpe. He had a gigantic blonde afro, big bushy sideburns down to his chin. Everyone had heard of him. He was notorious. He played in the North American Hockey League, was even rougher than the IHL. Lots of fighting. In one season, he racked up 285 penalty minutes in just 55 games. He started brawls all the time. I heard he once ripped his jersey and shoulder pads off and bare-chested challenged not just everyone on the other team to fight, but everyone in the arena. Players on his own team were afraid of him. Once he'd gone into the stands with his skates on to fight some opposing fans. He'd gotten one suspension for pulling a linesman's hair, another one for punching the linesman and shoving another. In 1975, while playing for the Syracuse Blazers, he was suspended and sitting in the stands in street clothes, but jumped onto the ice to join the Donnybrook, grabbed a stick, swung it at the other guys, fought one player, then punched the general manager of the team, practically knocked him out. He'd been removed from the arena by 10 policemen, arrested for assault. Eventually, the NAHL kicked him out of the league, banned him for life. That was my new teammate, in Toledo, not Dayton, pardon me, Toledo. I mean...
Yeah, Ogie
wow.
Oglethorpe, if you saw the movie Slapshot, that's based, and here he was coming into our locker room, and I'm with my buddy Randy Mones, my roommate, and I were looking at each other going, that's Ogie Oglethorpe.
Like, those guys don't exist. Those characters don't exist anymore.
Yeah, well, times have changed. That league, the league I played in Toledo, my first year there was fights constantly. My second year there, they almost got rid of them totally. The game changed, and they kind of, put the skill player back in the game and got rid of the guy who couldn't skate. And I think you see that somewhat in the NHL now.
Sure.
Fourth line players can play. Years ago, that fourth line player had a certain role, and it wasn't the same role that they have now.
Yeah, it was always the Ty Domies, right?
Yeah.
Would come out and he would be there was always the room for the goon.
Right.
And that's just been totally taken away. But these minor league teams, Moose, I mean, like people are just would go
different.
for the fights.
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, we had a tough team too. We had probably the best fighters in the league, which was great as a player like me, because I'm not a fighter. I mean, I'll fight if I have to, but we had guys that took care of that end of it, and boy, we had some tough guys. And they would tape their hands before the game, and I knew. Once they started taping their hands, I knew
were getting ready for
like
a fight.
There's going to be a fight before this game starts. There's going to be something, and there was.
Do you think the sport? You like where the sport's gone here, Mike?
Oh, I love the way the sport's gone.
Yeah,
the skill level is off the charts. The influx of the Europeans, the players now, they're letting them play. The little guy can play now, like he wasn't allowed to play years ago because they just beat you up or hold you, clutch you, and grab you. But the skill level is off the charts. I watch NHL games, but I watch college hockey and see how much better players are today. And a lot of it's, again, more players are playing from different parts of the country. When I was a kid, you were from Minnesota, Massachusetts, maybe Michigan, maybe New York, upstate New York, places like that. Austin Matthews is from Arizona. We got players from California, Texas, Florida. The sport has grown immensely, and the skill level is so much better. And I look at the women's game as well. I mean, the women's game is off the charts, how good the ladies are today, how many of them are great players. So the game has changed, and I love the way it's going.
We're talking with Mike Eruzione. You're a broadcaster here, MSG Network. You got a couple good stories in here about Phil Esposito. What are your memories of broadcasting Ranger games?
Oh, I worked with the Big Whistle, and it was amazing because he was a legend here. It was Jim Gordon and Bill Chadwick, and I was blown away by how many beers the Big Whistle would drink during the game. It hits it, and he said it was for his voice. And I'm like, okay,
I'm sure.
So when I started broadcasting, the Big Whistle. So I'd sit and I'd have a couple of beers in front of me, and have a couple of beers watching doing the Ranger games. But I loved it, and it was great about New York. And you people know the city way better. I'm from Boston, so
yeah.
We can tell.
When I would be upstairs doing the game, and sometimes I'd have to go downstairs between periods, and we're up on the rooftops.
Sure.
The smell of marijuana through the roof was amazing. How many people were getting high up there? And as I'm walking
the
around,
old blues.
Yeah, as I'm walking around to go to the elevator to go down, if the Rangers were winning, hey, Eruzione, you're the man. And if they were losing, Eruzione, you suck. You're from Boston. I hate Boston. It was like, come on, I'm just the commentator here.
That's funny. That is great.
It was great.
Did you enjoy your time broadcasting?
I loved it, and it was fun. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't going to be a life for me. Partly because my kids were real young. And I wanted to be home, and I was commuting. I'd fly into New York, take the shuttle in, shuttle out after games. If I want, sometimes I'd spend the night. Go to Studio 54 for the guys on the team.
With Ron Duguay and those guys.
Duguay was my roommate when I went to camp with the Rangers. He was a rookie, so I got to know Ronnie really well over the years. But that whole crew, Greshner, and they were living large, and it was fun. But I had a wife and 3 kids at home, so. I made a decision that let's do something else. I still did do some broadcasting in the Boston area, and I covered the Olympic Games for ABC for a few years. But that wasn't going to be my niche. It was fun, but it wasn't a livelihood I saw for myself, and ended up taking a job eventually at Boston University, and still ended up continuing to do motivational speaking, which I do quite a bit of still. So. That's kind of my livelihood now.
Mike, when, take us back to that, because people think that Russian game was against the Soviets was the gold medal game. It wasn't. But, going into that game, understanding, and you didn't really get a sense of just how big the moment was till afterward, right? But, how, you'd played them before, before the Olympics, and they beat you up at Madison Square Garden. They were a dominant team. As a group, how did you guys feel going into it?
Well, I think we felt we could win. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I've always said as an athlete, if you think you're going to lose, you probably will. Mm-hmm. So the mindset was, we got a chance, but we have to do certain things. We have to play real well. Jimmy has to play well. The game has to stay low scoring. If it got into 4 or 5 goals, if they score 4, we're not scoring 5. If they score 6, we're not scoring 7. So the game kind of went the way we hoped it would go, and we played the way we needed to play in order to win. And again, I think as the game moved along, our confidence level kept building and building and building.
Because you were skating with them.
And in third period, we controlled, somewhat after I scored. There were 10 minutes left, and I think the Soviets only had 5 or 6 shots on goal at that point. So everything fell into place the way we were hoping it did. But I can, obviously going into the game, you got to, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, boy, this is going to be tough. But the front of your mind is telling you, guess what? We're here. Let's, I hate to say it, the cliche, but let's play the game. Let's see what's going to happen. And again, we went in there with the mindset of that. Let's play and let's see what happens.
I once got the chance to interview Fetisov. I mean, did you ever reconnect with any of those guys that you beat?
No, my teammates, I think Neil Broughton, Mike Ramsey, Davey Christian, they played with the Soviet players later when they finally freed up these great players to come over here and play. And, they said to me they never even talked about it.
Really?
I said I would have brought my medal to practice.
Yeah, right.
I'd have brought it up every day. Hey, well, remember that game in 1980? Maybe that's why I didn't play after the Olympics. But I've never had an opportunity to speak to any of them, and probably curious what they think. I heard there was a special done years later with Fetisov, and some of these guys talk about it. But I've never seen that, so I don't know.
Mike, why do you think that moment, still to this day captures America's attention?
I think because of not only the athletic achievement, but I think the political climate at the time. And again, like I said, depending on how old you are. As a nation, we were looking for something to feel good about. Do you remember the hostages had been taken? The Soviets invaded Afghanistan. We boycotted the summer games, the threat of a Cold War, gas lines, inflation prices, unemployment. As a country, we just needed something. And it happened to be us. So I think that's part of the reason why the moment became so special. And it was the Soviets at the time, and the rival, the Cold War threat that we had. Somebody asked me, could that happen today? And I said no, because first of all, the Soviets aren't what they were in 1980.
Sure. And
the rivalry is not as political as it was then. So I kind of joke about it. I say, well, if ISIS had a hockey team and we beat them, then maybe that would be comparison, because people would look at it from a political end and not an athletic event.
Right.
To us as a hockey team, it was an athletic event. But to people in this country, it was something that we needed and we were able to get. It kind of like, showed the world, look, this is what makes our country so great, is working guys, which we were. Herb used to call us a lunch pail, hard hat group of guys. And I think people related to us. We were, we were kids who came from working class families who respected the game of hockey, respected each other, respected the country that we lived in and the honor it was to represent your country. And that's different than, I'm from Boston. I was hoping the Patriots would be in the Super Bowl. They're not. Well, San Francisco and Kansas City are. People in Chicago and New York, they don't care maybe because that's not their team.
Right.
But when it's the Olympic Games, it's a nation. Mm-hmm. So when we watch Michael Phelps or Eric Hayden or Simone Biles compete,
sure,
our women's soccer team, we feel a part of it because they represent us. And I think that's why our moment is still so special. Because of what it meant to people for a lot of different reasons other than sports.
Final one for me, and that's, you mentioned that you're in Lake Placid. It's 1980. You don't have Twitter, no social media. You call back to your home. Everyone's screaming and shouting. You assume they're having a party or something, so you hang up. What was the moment when you realized, oh my goodness, this has really become so big? Or if you want to tell a Studio 54 story, then we'll take one of those too.
No, I think... in Lake Placid, we knew it was big because it was in Lake Placid and everybody was excited. You go downtown, people are singing the Star Spangled Banner. People are singing God Bless America. You step on the ice, the USA, USA chants are going wild. And I think that's when the USA chants really kind of started, was in Lake Placid. And we knew it was big there. But then after, when President Carter sent Air Force One to take the Olympians to the White House, we got off the plane onto a bus. And going to the White House, the streets were wild with people waving flags, like 6-7 rows deep. And it was like, oh my God, people watch this thing. Then I remember getting on an Eastern Airlines plane, going back to Boston after we win the gold medal on Sunday. Monday, I'm flying back to Boston. I'm home.
Yeah.
And we landed at Logan Airport. Jack O'Callahan, Dave Silk, and myself, 3-4 Boston guys, but Craig Simon Atlanta, so he was gone. We get off the plane, and there's rows of people to meet us in the terminal. State police holding people back, and we're walking down, and people are chanting USA and waving flags, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Then I get in a limo to take me to my hometown. I only live 10, 15 minutes from Logan Airport, and the streets were lined with people in East Boston, which is next to my hometown. And I'm like, this is crazy. Then I pull into Winthrop, which is a small little peninsula town of about 20,000 people, and there's got to be 15,000 people at the bridge to meet me. And I'm like, holy Christ, this is crazy. Then I go home, and the police had to block off my street. People were standing in front of my house, and I lived in a 3-family house with all my cousins and stuff, and they're singing the Star Spangled Banner, and I come out on the balcony. I felt like the Pope. I was waving, and I said, "Look, I can you leave? Because I want to spend some time with my family."
Sure.
Yeah.
And everybody just left. And then I got up the next morning, and I flew to New York to do the Today Show, and I got on the plane, and everybody in the plane started applauding. And I turned around. I didn't know who got on the plane.
You're looking behind you.
It was like, this thing is incredible. Then I spent 2 or 3 days in New York City, and I couldn't shake hands anymore. My hand was swollen from shaking hands with people. I'd be walking down the street in New York, and people were clapping and waving, and I'm like, oh, this thing. And then from there, 40 years later, it
just continues.
Yeah, not as much, obviously.
No, right.
But when you talk sporting events, and I'll play celebrity golf tournaments, and every time I play golf, I'm walking down the fairway, somebody yells, "Hey, Mike, do you believe in miracles?" I play golf with Al Michaels sometimes in our celebrity events.
Yeah.
And you hear it all the time. "Al Michaels, do you believe in miracles?" I walk through an airport, somebody will say something. So it's nice because it's good. It's a feel-good story for obviously my teammates and I, but over the years, a feel-good story for people in this country. And kind of the basis too behind the book. I was never going to write a book, and I wrote the book for one reason. And it says it in the book, and one reason only. I want my grandkids to know that Papa's life wasn't just 2 weeks in Lake Placid. So, I talk about my house that I grew up in, my dad, my mom, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my brothers and sisters.
You got some characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like your dad was quite a character.
I could put 4 more chapters about my father in the book. But I wanted my grandkids to know that Papa did more than just that. And it's funny because I have five grandkids and 4 grandsons and a little granddaughter, but my 3 grandsons live down the street from me. My daughter's 3 boys, and they're 7, 6, soon to be 5. And they skate at the Mike Eruzione Center. The rink in my hometown is named after me. They have no idea who Mike Eruzione is. I'm Papa. They don't know anything about me, which is kind of cool because I won't have to watch that Miracle movie yet. I'm watching Thomas the Train right now. But that's basically the theory behind the book, and basically what our team was. We were a bunch of good guys that people related to because they respected us and admired what we went through and what we did.
Well, I mean, Mike, it's an iconic team, an iconic moment that will be remembered really forever. I mean, that's really what you guys were able to accomplish in 1980 up in Lake Placid. How did your childhood, you think, kind of shape you for that moment, shape you growing up?
I just think the work ethic that my father instilled in me and my 4 sisters and brother, that was something that we understood at a young age. My dad worked 3 jobs. My mother stood home and took care of 6 kids. They never went out to dinner. I never had a babysitter in my life. The house I grew up in, and talk about it in the book, is upstairs was my mother's brother who married my father's sister, and they had 5 kids in their family. And on the first floor was my father's other sister, and they had 3 kids in their family. So when my mother was pregnant, my aunts were pregnant. So I grew up in this loving, caring Italian house that you understood how important being a good person was, being a good brother, being a good sister, being a good neighbor, being a good friend, being a good teammate.
Yeah.
I think all those things I learned at a young age, and competitiveness was in the house because we competed against each other all the time. And the funny story was years later, as we all went on and got married and had kids, we had a 7-year run at my high school. The outstanding student athlete was somebody who came out of the 3-family house.
That's amazing.
And then my son, my youngest son, his senior year in high school, the high school baseball team, of the starting 9, 6 of them were relatives that came out of the 3-family house. So that's you talked about my upbringing. That's kind of you were brought up to be respectful and to work hard. And my dad always said, if you learn the value of work at some point in your life, you'll be successful. And it may not be today or tomorrow or next year. When you're the best at what you do, it'll be because of the time and effort and work that you put in. And that's a philosophy I've followed my whole life.
Great message.
And my kids have followed that, and my grandkids will follow that. And that's part of, again, growing up in the atmosphere that I grew up in an era where, parents worked hard for their kids. And mom stayed home, and I get it, things have changed. And it was more important for me to have my mother at home every day than I think it was for her to get a job. But things are different now. I understand that.
Yeah, it's a little bit different now. Mike, because the movie makes a big deal of it, but I want to ask you about the Brooks speech before the game against the Soviets.
Yeah, the movie has it a little longer. I remember it being, you were born to be a player, you were meant to be here, this moment is yours. And basically that was dead on because we were, I think, looking back, born to be players. We, for some reason, our lives all funneled into being on that 80 Olympic team for whatever reason it might be. Meant to be here. We were meant to be there because we had worked so hard for 6 months and trained so hard. And as far as the moping hours, nobody gave us a hope in hell of winning. 20 players, 2 doctors, 2 coaches thought we could win. I mean, going to the Olympics, they said we were going to come anywhere from 7th to 10th place. So a medal wasn't even thought about, let alone have an opportunity to play for a gold medal. So I think when he talked to us that night for the Soviet game, he was basically dead on. And Herb was a great speaker. And when he said something, it resonated. And there was always a thought behind it. He always used to tell us there's a method to my madness. And we never could understand what it was. And then we win an Olympic gold medal and you look back and go, you know what? Everything he said was right.
Well, and you guys worked. I mean, he made you guys work. I mean,
and we had some pretty good players. I mean, like I said, Kenny Morrow, 4 Stanley Cups with the Islanders. And the Islanders had a great team, but he was an important part of that team. Mike Ramsey, Dave Christian, Neil Broughton, 16, 17, 18 years. Neil Broughton scored 100 and something points his first year in the National Hockey League. He was 18. Mike Ramsey was 18. Our average age was 21, 22 years old. That's a college team now. So, we were young, but we were good. And we had a great coach and great assistant coach, Craig Patrick, great staff put together. I mean, things happen. You win championships when you have good people and good players, and that's what we had.
You were the captain of that team. Making of a miracle, the untold story of the captain of the 1980 gold medal winning U.S. Olympic team, Mike Eruzione, HarperCollins. It's out today. Hey, Mike, we appreciate the time.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks for having a Boston guy on the fan.
Oh, listen.
That's pretty good.
And it's been a tough couple days in the sports world. So thank
tragic.
you for providing some levity and a nice little break from that.
Yeah,
so
every
thank
once
you,
in a
Mike.
while we got to smile, but we also have to remember too. And
for sure,
so sad for Kobe and everyone else associated with that incident.
Yeah,
Terrible.
and it was nice just to have a little uplifting and a nice feel good moment.
Well,
so
anytime
thank
you can work
Mike.
Studio 54 into the conversation, Mike.
Yeah,
I mean,
I only
never
went there a
bad.
couple of times. At least that's what I told my girlfriend, who was not my wife at the time.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Mike, a pleasure.
Hey,
Best of luck with
thanks
everything.
for having
all
me
right?
on. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. Mike Eruzione.